Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today I'm going to the Shavuot daf Chav Daled. We're going to begin on Chav Daled and Aleph, the second line from the top. Now, we were learning when it comes to our Mishnah that a person says, I'm going to make a Shavuot shel oichel, so it has to be something in which you're allowed to eat. However, when it comes to something which is inedible, then it should not be chal. And that's what it says. It says, if you eat something which is not royal achila, so then you're potter. But yet we also learn, if a person makes a shvuah, I'm not going to eat nevelish, treifish, shkotz, vermasim, in which in the Havamina, at least at this point, the Gemara is saying that that's also inedible, so therefore you should also be potter, be a chayiv. So why are you potter, why are you chayiv? So the Reisha that says that if it's you eat something which is not something which is edible, so is bestam, because you didn't specify. So therefore, when you just made a shvuah shel oichel, it understood that was referring specifically to foods that are edible, not inedible. The seifa is where you were mafarish, that you were you specified, and therefore, since you specified, you said shkatz and ramasim and all these things. So therefore, that includes things which are inedible. So therefore, that was one answer. And where he said, well, 1 second, if you're taka going to be chayiv, then why don't we say it's mush mahar sinai? How could you be chayiv on nevelos, the case of this, shkatz and ramasim, that you violated that shvuah, that you ate these non-kosher things, you're not allowed to eat them anyway. So Rav Shimon Rabbi Yochanan said, with regard to koil devarim ha-matorim and devarim ha-asurim. In other words, you're right. If all I'm going to do is make a shvuah, I'm not going to eat pig, that's nothing, because I'm not allowed to do it anyway. But if I included kosher and non-kosher together, so we say migu that it works for the kosher food, so also the shvuah chal and nevelos and treifas. And Reish Lakish didn't want to say that, but rather he said that you could understand the machlokas between Rabbi Kiva and the Tanakh, which we saw previously, whether or not a person is chayiv only at a certain shear or even kol shehu, which Rabbi Kiva said. Now, maybe the Torah only will punish you when it comes to a certain measurement. However, if you mention chatzi shir, so therefore the chatzi shir is not, which is not even mahar sinai. It's you're not to have a certain shir of iser. However, pachais mashir, chatzi shir, that's not included, and therefore you could be chayav for eating a chatzi shir of shkatz and ramasim. Okay. Now, we said, so I can understand Rabbi Yochanan didn't want to say a Greek Shlakish, who he said, because he established it like everyone. So, Reish Lakish, why doesn't he hold like Rabbi Yochanan? This whole notion of koilel, that you can include mutter and usher together. So, because he doesn't actually hold of this. He doesn't hold that there's a concept of you could do, be koilel. Two things. Now, even though there is a concept of Isser Kolel, as we see on the top of Chaf Daled and Aleph, that's only Isser Haba Me'elav. It's an Isser that comes by itself. So, for example, you have Nevela, which is already Asr, and then Yom Kippur comes later on. So, if you would eat on Yom Kippur Nevela, so the din is that you're talking going to be Chayiv Chatas for Yom Kippur. Now, why? It's already Nishba Mahar Sinai. It's already, not Nishba, but it's already an Isser from Har Sinai, that you can't eat Nevela. But we say that since this Isser came on its own, so therefore it'll work. It'll work. However, if you're the one that created the problem, right? You're the one who made the Isser Shua, so in that situation, he will not hold of Isser Kolel. And therefore, that's the reason why he doesn't say, well, maybe it's a case where you had a steak and you made a shul, I'm not going to eat steak and nevela. Shchut and nevela. Because in that case, he doesn't agree to that. Because if you bring the Isser upon yourself, then he doesn't hold Isser Kolel. He'll only hold of it like Yom Kippur, which just happens. Okay. Now, Bishlam Reish Lakish Mishum Hachi Ka Pater Rav Shimon. Now we can understand why Rav Shimon is potter, says Rashi, since he talks about the case of Chatzi Shir, and something which is Chatzi Shir, it was not at Har Sinai, so that's why it takes effect. The whole Isser is a Shir, so therefore when you made a Shua, it works with Chatzi Shir. So we can understand why Rav Shimon will pater. The Ksaver Kol Shu Nami Mushav Oimidhu. Instead of Rav Shimon Oimer Kol Shu Lamakas. Rav Shimon will disagree, as we see over here. But Rav Shimon is saying Rav Shimon Oimer Kol Shu Lamakas V'lo Oimer Kazayas El Carbon. So I can understand why Rav Shimon says you're pater, because even Kol Shu you're chayiv. So therefore it's still Mushav Oimid. El Rav Yochanan my time but Rav Shimon the pater. Understand? Why does Rav Shimon pater? After all, l'chayra by Isser Koel, when you say meat again shchuta and nevela, that should work. So midhud time el mishum Isser Koel. Rav Shimon the time delesli Isser Koel. The reality is he doesn't hold like that. He doesn't hold that you would be that it would work, and that Taki would not be chayiv. That's what Rav Shimon holds, because he doesn't hold of Isser Koel. Okay, so look at Rashi. According to Rabbi Yochanan, Pater Mechatos, Delo Asi Karis Yom Kippurim V'Chayal Isser Nevela, that the Isser of Karis cannot come and V'Chayal Isser Nevela or Isser Ever Menachai. Im Lo Nisavol Mebe'erev V'Afagav Yom Kippurim Koyolhu. Fine. So he doesn't hold it that. Okay. Now, Bishol Marish Lakish Namaikol B'Chatzi Shir Ein Carbon Shua Ba Ella Im Kain Atamaitze Ba Lavahain. The mashma davar b'chilufo. Yes or no, and you did the opposite. V'haim mafarish shelo oichel chatzi shir. You specified, I'm not going to eat chatzi shir nevela. The mishkachas l'nami mishua shoichel chatzi shir nevela the lam nishmo levatel semitzahu. Since it was only chatzi shir, so therefore it's the reason why you'd be chayiv. According to him, Rav Shimon holds that you're chayiv even on a koshu, but Rabbi Yochanan the Mikol Bashir Shalem Umishim Koel Val Korachach Mafarish Nevelos Vakimta. So how do we understand this? Okay, it must be because Rav Shimon doesn't hold of Isser Koel. The Sanya Rav Shimon Omer Ha'Eichel Nevel B'Yom Kippurim Pater. Even though we said before that you're going to be chayev chatas, that's according to the Rabbanan. However, Rav Shimon holds you're going to be pater because he doesn't hold of Isser Koel. Now Bishlam Reish Lakish Mishkachas La. As we said, I can understand where you say yes or no. That you have to, again, as it says, hara lahativ. El Rav Yochanan Bishlam la mishkachas. I can understand lav el lahain hech mishkachas, says Rashi. According to Rav Yochanan, the moikila shir shalem, that it has to be a set full amount. Umishum koyel, that has nothing to do with the amount. Because so the question is, so why does it work? Why are you chayiv by shkatzim masim? Because if he holds of Isser Koel, v'al korchach mefarish nevelos, that you specified in the nevelos, the kimta mishum kush kamais and reishim seifa, and that's how he answered it. Now I can understand shavu shul oichel. I make a shavu I'm not going to eat. We find that it's chal, even though it's nishmu oimin mishum koel. Because you said something, you said, I'm not going to eat steak and I'm not going to eat nevela. Elahain shvua she'oichel nevelas of shchutais. Person makes a shvua, I will eat this. Mimishkachas la de techel a nevelas levata shvuas har Sinai. Can't be mavatal a mitzvah. So how do we understand that? So again, bishlam reish lakish mishkachas la b'lavahain. So Reish Lakish could establish it by yes or no, because he's talking about measurements. El Rav Yochanan, who says it has to be koilel bishlam alav mishkachas. I'm not going to eat this. I'm not going to eat that. El lahain heichem mishkachas. El could Rabbi. The Emir Rabba shur shul oichel. A person makes a shur I'm not going to eat. V'achol offer. Then he ends up eating dust, which is inedible. So in that case, pater. Says Rashi. El kula b'stam. You weren't just in general the Reisha and the Seifa. V'oyachin shenu and lechila the katani Reisha pater k'derabba. The reason why you're pater by eating dust is mefarsh going offer shenu royal lechila because you can't eat it at all. Of an availus royas lechila hain. However, as we said before, this is what we're getting back to, is that really in nevelos and trevos you can eat them. They are edible. You can eat them, right? It's just only the arya who deraviolayu. Hashem says we can't eat it. Right? So it still falls under this general category. And therefore, that's the reason why you're going to be potter. Omarav Mori Afanam Tinina, and we also have support to this. That nevelos, that something which is a nevel is something which is actually fit to eat, technically, is royal achila, which is we're not allowed to. How do we see this? Kainim Ishti Nehenesli, I'm making a nether for my wife getting hana for me. Imachalti ayoim, if I ate today. V'ochel nevelos treif, shkotz v'ramasim, hari ishto asuruloi. Now, why is she usher? You only ate shkatzim or masim, and that's not food. The answer is yes, it is. So we see clearly that it is a chila. Hachi hashta. You can't compare the two. Hasam over there, kivani mikar achal. Since originally we're dealing with food. V'hadur shtabale, and then afterwards he made a shvu. Then he made a shvu as we continue chaptal mabeis. Chashuvi achashve. He made his eating chashiv, says Rashi, b'chilaso, by him eating it. V'gila atzmer sheinu katz behen. The fact that he's eating shkatz or masim, or nevela, it shows he's not repulsed by it. Lo shemate kain achein hu ikar be'ein. Okay, elahacha. When it came to the wife, mi achshve. Is he really being machshiv the food? No. So it's not a riot. So Rabbi, my time of demand isle iser koilel. What is the reason why you hold iser koilel? Mididehavi iser moisef. He compares it to iser moisef. Uman de pater delays. Uman de pater delaysle ki omer iser moisef b'chada chaticha b'shtei chatichos lo amrinan. The only time we'll say it is when we're dealing with one thing. Not if it's two separate pieces, then we're not going to say. Look in Rashi. When it comes to the veil in Yom Kippur, it's aser to eat. You can't eat this because it's Yom Kippur, but also you couldn't eat it before because it was nevela. Nimsa shlo hoisif oleha iser acharoin klum. You're not really adding anything. So we say migu dechal yom kippurim al adam la'aser b'shar oichel mishum yom kippurim. Since a person is not to eat any food on Yom Kippur at all, kol nami es a nevela imah. So we can include the nevela l'schai mishum yom kippurim. So that's iser kolel. It's because this person's not to eat anything, so therefore included in not being able to eat anything is the veil. Isser moisif is kish isser acharon moisif al chaticha atzma. That you're adding something. Davar shul hayaba alide isser rishon, which wasn't there before. The asar chaticha acharon b'mash ha'isem muteres koidim. It now becomes asr kagon. Chaylev shel hektish. Asr lechol. Why can't you eat it? This fat mishum chaylev. However, you can still burn this on the mizbeach. Nasan noiser. Once this chaylev was sitting around for a long time, so it was permitted on the mizbeach, and then now all of a sudden you have noiser, it became left over, so you can't go on the mizbeach anymore. So moisav of iser l'mashal hisu mutereslo to nisal akrava. You can no longer put it on the mizbeach. So that's what's called iser moisav. So before you weren't allowed to eat it, but now you can't even use it for the mizbeach. Since we say that it does have an isser of noiser, even though there is an isser on it, but the isser is moisif. Now there's an additional isser. Ve'in isser rishon ma'akiv al yado melchol she'in ze isser chal isser. Chal leha nami isser shem noiser etzel kol adam ha'oichel. V'eschayev ola mishum chel v'mishum noiser. Ava v'sheish kan isser chal isser. So again, it's the notion of isser chal isser could be by an isser moisif, because you're making it worse. You're making it worse. Before, again, chayil you couldn't eat, but at least you could put it on the mizbeach. Now, once it's noiser, you can't even do that. That's what's called isser moisif. So let's go back in the Gemara. So Man de pater, an Isser Moisef, Delesle, Kiyomer Isser Moisef. When does he say the Isser Moisef does work? B'chada chaticha. If we're talking about the same piece of chalev. B'shtei chatichos lo amrinan. However, if we're dealing with multiple pieces, so then it will not. Says Rashi. Kid b'farish, Mitashachal Hashem Isser Sheni Eitzel Davar Shahayim Muterlo Chal Af Eitzel Davar Shahisa Surlo Kvar. We don't say this from one piece to the next. Yomi Rava, Laman di Isle Isser Koel, the one who even holds of Isser Koel, Omer Shavuot Shel Oichel Te'enim. Let's say a person says, I'm not going to eat figs. Because Yomer Shavuot Shel Oichel Te'enim Anav, I'm not going to eat figs or grapes. So Migadachal Anavim, since it's a separate shvul regarding grapes, so Chayil Nam Ya Te'enim. So we say it's also Chayil on the Te'enim, because it's considered to be Isser Koel. So Pshita, so Madatema, Isser Habam Elav Amrinan, Isser Habam Atzmal Amin and Kamashmon. As you said, maybe the only time we hold the Isser Koel is if it comes by itself, like Yom Kippur, not when you make a shua. Okay. Alright. Let's see. Isser Yom Kippur al Nevela is an Isser Koel. Isser Naisa Chalev is Isser Moisef. Okay, that was the rest of question 11. Alright. So, Masav Rabba Berei de Rabba. So, he asked the question. Yesh Oichel Achil Achas. The person could eat one piece of food, right? V'chayv Aleha Arba Chatois. And nonetheless, even though it's one eating, you can be chayav 4 separate carbon chatais, b'asham echad, and also one chayav, you're chayav an asham. How's that possible? Veil hain. So this is achil achas. Rashi is with zayis echad. So why are you chayav so many times? Veil hain tamei. You're chayav because let's read it. Tamei she'oichel chalev v'hu neiser mina mikdashim yom kippurim. Says Rashi chayav mishum chalev. Mishum Neiser, Mishum Mekhipurim, Mishum Tamish Oichos HaKodesh, Hari Arba Chatais. So those are the 4 Chatais that are mentioned. V'asham Echad, Me'ila, and there's one Isser of Me'ila. V'fil Kayin, okay. Ramer Oimer Avim Hoysa Shabbos, V'hoitziu Chayiv. Even if it's Shabbos and you take it outside, so you're going to be Chayiv. However, says Rashi, so there's a machokas or the din when it comes to Yom Kippur. If there's a din, an Isser Hotzah, so maybe you're not going to be chayiv. It's on Yom Kippur. If Yom Kippur Shcholios b'Shabbos, okay. So Amulo Enu Min Hashem. That's not part of the can't be the part of the categories. Says Rashi, Ein Chatazu Ba Mishum Ba'achila Mishum Hotzah. Okay, even if you do hold it, there's an Isser of carrying on Yom Kippur, right? Nonetheless, it was Shabbos. It doesn't make any difference. Even if you're technically archive, we're not going to mention that case because there's nothing to do with eating. We could throw in another one. I'm not going to eat a davar mutter and a davar aser. So you can be chayiv on a shvua. No kika. So why don't we include that? So why isn't that part of the group? So there's a bunch of answers. So kikatani. So it's why don't we hold the Isser Koel? So as we said before, kikatani Isser haba mi'olav is we only say that if an Isser comes by itself, like it's neveil, and then all of a sudden Yom Kippur comes. Isser haba me'atzmol katani. Now it comes to an Isser that you brought upon yourself, like as we said before, making a shvua. I'm already hektish. So one of the cases is hektish. B'char means that you're the one that did it. No, but b'char, it was always the kedushas morechem. It was always kodesh. You weren't mekadeshim. Iboy saying makikatani midi delesle. Another answer midi delesle she'ela. When it's something in which you can just get out, like making a shvua, you can go to a chacham to matir the iser. So therefore, we don't want to include that. Shvua deisle she'ela. Shvua deisle she'ela katani. Hari hektish. When it comes to hektish, that comes alidei neder, there's a din she'ela. So ha ukminan b'bechor. No, we already said that we're talking about a case of bechor, and that bechor there's no din she'ela. So iboy seima kikatani carbon kavua. Maybe the only times when we're chayiv carbonai, so when I mention the carbonai you're chayiv, is the carbon kavua of a chatas doesn't make a difference of your financial status. Carbon olavi yared lo katani. We don't want to mention this different type of a carbon in which depends on your financial status. I hari tami shaychas a kaidish the carbon olavi yared who. We mentioned already in the beginning of the Masechta, many dafim, there is a din carbon olav yared when it comes to someone who's telling you ate kodesh. The answer is benasi. Rabbi Elazar. We're talking about a nasi and Rabbi Elazar. The Omer nasi maybe seir that hitaka brings a different type of carbon. He brings a seir. Ravashi Omer kikatan made the chal kishir. Something which you're chayiv when you have a certain amount. Shavuot the chayil pachas meshir katani. You can be chayiv on pachas meshir, therefore we don't mention it. Ari hektish habina and sheva pruta has to be a certain amount. Ravashi ma'avira oim v'rav aiba habina and sheva hari hektish habina and sheva pruta. All right, so that's the answer. Okay, Ravashi ma'avira oim rav zera kikatani is the dana karis. Zedaino lav lokatani. We only want to mention the case that they're b'shaygeg you're in a carbon chatas, but mezid there's a chiv karis because you're a person who does malacha and all these things on Yom Kippur is chiv karis. However, when it comes to a shul, it's a lav, so we don't mention that case. I bahar asham this daino lav lokatani. We mentioned asham as we continue chaf Haman Aleph b'chatas kamrina. We're talking about specifically the four. Why don't you make a fifth chatas? So we're not talking about the asham. Ravina oimer kikatani midi nechayil amidi devar chilhu shvua dechayil amidi delavar chilhu lokatani. We want to mention things that only are linked to food, not something which could a shvua which could even be inedible. I bahari hektish dechayil nabi eitzav avanim. Right. So I don't know why we just should answer the exact same question. So no, I thought we were talking about a bechor. Okay. Ella kikatani midi dechayil amidi ismei mashasha, something which has substance. Shvua dechayil amidi leismei mashasha. However, when it comes to shvua, it's even chal something which does not have any substance. Kagain sheishin shalishin, I will sleep, I won't sleep. Lokatani, because that's considered to be even has no mashasha. Norm by neder. It's not chal on, as we see in Masechtas Nedarim, it's not chal on a davar sheyein bo mamish. It has to be a davar sheish bo mamish, because a neder is on the cheftza, but because a shvu is on the gavra, it's on the person. So therefore, if it's a davar, even davar sheyein bo mamish, because you are mamish, you are here, and therefore it is chal. Okay, but not. So that's the reason why by a shvu it's chal on davar sheyein bo mamish. Okay, we're going to stop there. And let's see, question 12. So the Gemara Amru 6 differences why we cannot compare the chatas the shuas bitoy or chatas the manu. So at least mention 4 of the 6. Yes. So we said maybe we don't mention our case because it's by shvua it's an isra haba. Ali de atzma, you did it yourself, or because of shvuat isash b'she'ela, that it could be removed ali de chacham, or it's only mentioning chatas kavua, not oil v'yarid. It could be the other ones are only with a shear. This is even pachs shear, or it only mentions things that zadaino is kares. This is ein zadano kares, or it's chal on something which does not have mashasha. When it comes to a shua as opposed to them. TA 18. Yesh oichel chilachas chayv leha arba chatois. Madua katani gam shua. Again, exact same question. Difficult question to know 6 of them. So this is on Chaf Dal and Amud Beis, Chaf Ham and Aleph, as we just did. Chaf Dal and Amud Beis to Chaf Ham and Aleph. Which is question. What did I write over here? That was question 12, right? So this is question TA 18. It's logical that this question is going to pop up again, and number 12 and TA 18, which is this. Okay. TB 20. Tanan shur shlo hinachti tvilin hayoim adkan.